Assalamu alaikum. I am Chandra Kumar. Today I am going to discuss about biodiversity part number 2nd. In this especially lecture we will cover the some especially the remaining parts of the biodiversity we will discuss it especially in detail. So before starting to this lecture, if you have not subscribe my YouTube channel, please do subscribe, like, comment and share. So let's start. First we start what is IUCN. First we discuss and define the IUCN rate list. Okay, IUCN we can say International Union for the Conservation of Nature Resources. This is the especially this is the department for the protection of the especially natural resources of plants and animal species worldwide. Either these species are endangered, they are outnumbered, especially these species are they may not exist in a natural environment. So these species that could be protected by this department. This department has some code of conduct, and we call the red list. They have categorized some red list. So we will discuss the red list. So what is the red list? So we will know about the red list. Red list means especially some species these are endangered. They may not survive in natural environment. We call especially these species are especially endangered or extinct. We can say these species are kept as red list or means are important just species to be protected and from the especially from the especially degrading of these species. So we will know especially about IUCN red list. World most comprehensive inventory of the global conservation status of biodiversity science. IUCN red list founded in 1964. It was just like to be established in 1964. The main object of this was to be protect the species in nature in environment by providing artificial mediums or by certain mechanisms. IUCN it has 9 categories. It could be protected by 9 categories to impose to categorize. Especially it has 9 lists. It could be protected. First category 1 we call extinct. Extinct means just like no individual species remaining. Some species they were in past, but currently their species totally have been diminished. We call extinct. Extinct in wildlife. If we talk about the second term, extinct in wildlife means it may not survive only in wildlife, but it may survive outside the wildlife. So we call extinct because of the certain conditions. Maybe it could be for competitions. It may be because of the environment that become threat for them, and their hunting and our exploitations of resources. That's the key factors. The next one, critically endangered. One is critically endangered, the next one is only endangered. Critically endangered means extremely higher risk of extinction in the wildlife. Critically endangered are those species they may not survive because there is high chances of their diminutions. Certain exploitation either could be just like this species could be hunted, or either this species could be like predation by certain living organisms. So especially, or maybe these species are very critically they may not survive, and there's just like chances to be protected at now, and if we will not protect these species may diminish very soon. The next one is endangered, and the endangered means species which have risk in the wildlife, but they especially the main difference of this endangered means especially they may die, but it may take time. Especially these are not extremely endangered, but these are especially endangered to be protected because their birth ratio is very low, and we can say death ratio is very high. On the other hand, their environment has become very critical for them to be survive or to just like live. So we call endangered. The next one is vulnerable. The term of vulnerable means high risk of endangered species in the wildlife. Vulnerable means those species these are are to be we can say critical conditions we call vulnerables. Either these species could be environmentally vulnerable or could be like which is hunting vulnerables especially. So many kinds of plants still are to be considered as vulnerables. So vulnerable species are to be protected in artificial mediums. The next one is threatened. Near threatened, if we talk about in future, this species could be in like we can say that in threat because that species may not survive in future. So there's possibility to protect this species this time. Like peacock could be we can say near threatened in future because there are certain species their we can say birth ratio is very low and environment has become very harsh for them to survive. So especially these species so they may diminish especially in future we call near threat. The least concern threat. Least concern means lowest risk does not qualify more at a risk category. Wide spirit, it could be abundant taxa or categorized in this category. Least concern means there's less chances, there's low risk of special diminution of that species, especially we call a least risk. The second one, especially data sufficient. Data sufficient, if we talk about this one, no enough species or no enough data to be as we can say no enough data has been assessed have been available to know the how many species have been extinctions because the research is going on. Especially scientists they claim that especially 30% of the living organisms their species have been discovered, but the remaining they have not been discovered. Especially the research going on in future they may discover especially. So still data is not available, so we don't know how many species have been diminished by the passage of time, especially in evolution, just like in Jurassic period, Cretaceous period, and previous especially we don't have available data, but it's the research of scientists and their especially discoveries and their struggles in different field of science is going on. In future, their struggle, especially in future, they may know. So especially this is the last one. Now we discuss about the measurement scale of biodiversity. First, we know what is measurement scale. Measurement scale are the scales that could be used to measure. This was introduced by the we can say that R.H. Whitaker. R.H. Whitaker, you know who was the scientist? He was the scientist to classify the kingdom. Like he gave the concept of 5 kingdom of classification in biology. Okay, so R.H. Whitaker he categorized the 3 terms alpha, beta, gamma on the basis of the measurement scales. We can measure the biodiversity on the basis of their 3 names: alpha diversity, beta diversity, and gamma diversity. Especially in previously we have learned the special types of biodiversity, like if we talk about the types of biodiversity, species diversity, genetic diversity, and ecosystem diversity. But here you don't need to become confused. Here this is the term of measurement scales, means we can measure the diversity in within ecosystem by using these terms. First we discuss alpha diversity. Alpha diversity means number of species found in particular area or region or any particular place or habitat. It means that if we talk about any species of their how many number of that species exist in third parker, for example, if how many number of peacock species would exist in third parker, we call alpha diversity. While beta diversity could be the we can say that variation of species composition between 2 habitats. It means that we will study about 2 habitats. The habitats of Hyderabad could be different from Karachi. So we will compare the habitats of these species. So it's known as beta diversity. The compared diversity between not homogeneous areas and habitat is including more than alpha. Especially in alpha we have discussed especially we have learned number of particular species found in particular area, means species, any species that found particular but in beta diversity we can compare alpha diversity, just like alpha Hyderabad calamity of Hyderabad is alpha with comparing with the third parker, that's totally different, we call beta diversity. In beta diversity we will compare the 2 diversity of the region or habitat, we call the beta diversity. Or beta diversity we can do compare. Okay, the last one is gamma diversity. Gamma diversity is the measurement of all of number of species within a region. It is sum of all species, all the habitat within a region. What does it mean? It means that gamma diversity means how many species exist on the biome, on the earth. We will study, we know, we can just like give the term of gamma diversity. Gamma diversity on earth, how many species would exist? Million of species definitely would exist. We can measure by using gamma diversity. Here I would discuss, especially I would do alpha. In alpha especially we study about particular one area of diversity. In beta we do compare of two habitat diversity. In gamma we especially do study all over the biome diversity. How would species, especially with these species would these species having a certain changes in diversity, we call biome diversity. It could be like as a biome diversity or biosphere diversity. So this is also known as gamma diversity. I hope this especially point you have cleared. We move further. Especially we move further. The next one, what are unknown categories for the species? It means that what are the methods or mechanisms we don't know the species categories, how these species in which category the species categorized are related. Totally unknown. No any information about these species. Means totally unknown means we don't have any sufficient information to know about the species. The next, status unknown. We don't know species and their status, and their status means position or we can say background of their species. So that information is unknown. Like we can say many other species that has been considered as a status unknown. Candidate and identifying species is underway process. We can say the research is going on to know the identification of species. We can coin the method or we can say social term is also known as candidate unknown. Means research is going on to know these species. These are the three especially categorized: totally unknown, in which no information available, and the status unknown, no information is available about the status informations. Status means background informations. The third last one is candidate information. No information, no especially the information is the information of gaining that the species, these species, identifying of these species going on in future. These species they may know, especially hotspot. What is hotspot and what are the hotspots in Pakistan? If we talk about hotspots, means any particular area where vegetation would be high, but that the vegetation could be affected by certain activities we call human activity. Is definitely anthropic activity or human activity that is the threat for environment to just like harm the environment. That's the very bad. So especially recently, especially so scientists have discovered, especially have talked about hotspot biodiversity. Hotspots very simple is any particular region area where number of species will be high. For example, if we talk about any forest, like we can say Himalayan forest where hotspot biodiversity would be there, but there especially the threat is the other species would be there. They do just like hunt and kill these species, and this biodiversity is being affected by the especially other organisms we call hotspot biodiversity. Currently, the concept of hotspot was given by the scientist, we can say Norman, Mayer scientist in 1988. 1988, Norman scientist, he was British, so he gave the concept of a hotspot. Currently, 35 hotspots identified worldwide. How many hotspots? If anybody asks a question, especially regarding how many hotspots have been identified or discovered worldwide, you can say 35 hotspots exist, which means that it represents 2.3% of the Earth landscape. How many? 2.3% landscape on Earth. So we can say that especially landscape is covered by especially hotspot biodiversity. The next, especially the landscape area, in this area 50% of population and of 50% wild plants are endemic endemic are 42% of them are terrestrial vertebrate. If we talk about, especially if we talk about how many percent of 50% plants are like we can say that endemic. Endemic means they are found in a particular one region. 50% they cannot grow in other region. For example, if we take if you take a child as just like the plant, if we take the plant of like kumbat and from third barker, we plant in other habitat, that in that habitat definitely it would not grow. We call the endemic. Means these species they would not survive naturally, but in artificially, by giving artificial mediums they may survive. We call the endemic. The next we can say 42% of terrestrial species are vertebrates. Means it means that vertebrates having the coordinate, we call vertebrates. Only 42 terrestrial are those species they may live on land. Like humans, we are terrestrial. Like all the mammals are terrestrial, and amphibians are those they may either live in water or in land. And they have both habitat, so we call amphibians. So we will move further. Criteria for just like hotspot. The criteria for hotspot criteria it means it must contain with 15,000 endemic species of vascular plant. How many? 15,000 species contain. It means that 0.5% of the worldwide. Must have 7% original habitat. It especially most of these species have lost 70% original habitat due to the environmental conditions are certain others, and these species have lost their original conditions. Now we discuss another term is conservation and preservation. Define the term conservation and preservation. First we discuss the conservation. What is conservation? Simply, conservation means sustainable. Here we can say that conservation means conservation of sustainable use and management of resources, including wildlife, water, air, and earthquake deposits. Conservation, it means that use of resources that would not give impact to the earth, to the climate, including wildlife, species like wildlife, especially those living also they may live in like a forest, that would not be eliminated, that would not be given harm, especially water that would be sustainable and to be purified, air that would be better, and earth deposits. The earth deposits means whatever we can dig out, whatever we can use the habitat that would not give negative impact to the climate. Second, conservation is aimed at reducing the wear and tear of earth. Conservation means it helps to just like to reduce the wear and tear. Means if we cut one tree of the plant, just like if we cut one tree on the earth, definitely we need to plant two trees to sustain the environment, especially to protect the species and environment become friendly. The second point, nature resources may be renewable and non-renewable. Nature resources, how many types of resources? Two. Renewable are resources, those resources that could be used again and again. Non-renewable resources are those that could be used as limited purpose. So it helps to protect nature resources. There's conservation of nature resources means limiting their consumptions to slow their replacement rate. Conservation of non-renewable resources like fossil fuels involves ensuring that sufficient we can say conservation of sufficient quantities are maintained for future generation to replace. We can say especially using fossilization oil fuels, this especially in future these resources that may become, and because we are using too much, so it would be negative impact on it. So conservation, it helps to use as limited purpose, and in future it would not diminish, so it helps to conserve. The focus of nature resources conservation on the needs and interests of people. These needs may be fall under the biological, cultural, and recreation economic. It means that these needs are based on the biological. It means it's based on the certain, especially biological construction and culture, recreation, economics. It helps to develop economy, to protect, just like to grow the economy, to provide the especially best life to the world, especially. So this is the very important. Example of this one is using less water, wood, and other nature resources. That is the best example of the conservation. In conservation, we can protect the species from especially using. Just we can prevent from our using by, especially these are two resources, we can say natural and renewable resources and non-renewable resources. If we use non-renewable resources and unlimited, definitely in future we would face consequences. The next one is preservation. Preservation is the act of protecting and maintaining present state of nature resources. We can say in conservation we have just like discussed the use of use of nature resources as a limited levels. We can protect the nature resources, but here we can protect and maintain present states of nature resources. Preservation seeks for protection from nature resources from using and prevent damage from resources by not following the means human to interfere with it. Preservation, just like some species they may not survive in a natural medium, we can just like put into artificial medium and just we can preserve it. So preservation is a very important process. Preservation of nature resources mainly focus on resources in like pristine state resources are that have not been touched by humans. Preservation resources that could not be touched by human resources just could be protected at a particular place. The main concern for preservation of some resources is that mankind is successfully utilizing them for housing. We can say we are utilizing these, especially housing and farming industries, tourism and other human development purposes, which damage the natural beauty, especially like in housing, farming and industry. Especially these things have created negative impact on natural beauty. So the main especially example of the herbarium is seed bank, gene bank and blood bank. Seed bank, in which especially seeds are to be preserved, just like to preserve, and gene bank, different kinds of genes and different species in past their genes have been preserved for further study and for further research, especially. And like blood bank, there is blood bank too, and that is especially that helps to just preserve the blood. So especially blood bank that cannot be just like touched by that cannot be touched by humans. So these are to be the best examples of the nature, best example of the preservation. In preservation, just like we can protect and maintain the present states, the genes of the seeds of the certain especially species and blood of the certain species we can we can protect. Especially the next one, what is conservation of biodiversity and describe its type. Means here we discuss the types of conservation. Conservation means very simply protect the number of variety of species, either could be plants or animals. We call conservation of biodiversity. The main of conservation of biodiversity is the particular participation by seeking to meet human needs for biological resources while ensuring the long-term sustainability of these resources. It means that we need to just like use these resources as biological resources. Like these species would not be eliminated. These species would not be giving harm to species, and these and the environment that would be sustainable, and these species would be present in abundant level in future. So especially there are two types of conservation. Number one, if we talk about number one conservation is in situ conservations. In situ conservations, especially in situ conservations. In situ conservation or on-site conservation. In situ conservation is of the plant or animals in the natural habitat, that is known as in situ conservation, to be protect in natural habitat. In situ enemies under, we can say inside, very simple. Situ means site or place. In situ conservation is the process in which we can protect the species in their natural habitat. We call in situ conservation. The best example of in situ conservation is a national park and sanctuary, biosphere reservation, and nature reserve and reserve protected area. While especially the second one is the ex situ conservation. The ex situ conservation, X means outside, set means X means out or off. We can say site means Situ means just like means a particular base. Conservation of the plants and animals within, especially in plants outside their habitat, we call the ex situ conservation. Ex situ conservation are those plants they may not survive in a natural habitat. We can protect these plants in a artificial medium. We can protect these plants in a just like in a in their we can provide we can just like protect these plants in a artificial medium we call the ex situ conservation. The best example of the ex situ conservation is zoological garden, botanical garden, aquarium. In zoological garden we can provide artificial mediums, nutrients, and even water to these plants they may grow especially. So this is the best examples of the zoological garden, aquarium, and seed bank, gene bank, DNA bank, tissue culture, and horticulture. This is the main example of the ex situ plant. Describe species richness and species abundance. First we discuss what is species richness. If we talk about species richness means number of different species present in ecological or community, landscape, or region. How many different number of species present in an area we call species richness. Species is simply a count of species. We can say counting of a species, how many number of species would exist in different area. For example, if a populations of like humanity, how many humanity would exist in earth, we call the species richness. How many humanity definitely not a species. How many species would exist in earth, like we can say that especially their number, whatever number would be, we call it species richness. Count of species also is human species richness. Species abundance very simply. Species abundance is number of quantity of the species. How many their quantity would exist, we call species abundance. In ecological area we call species abundance. Define sustainable and sustainable biological resources. Especially biological resources is sustainable is a substance or object to environment protect and protect by an organism for normal growth, maintenance and reproduction. बायोलॉजिकल ग्रोथ के पास सिंपल जैसे वो सिस्टम बना चाहिए ऑर्गेनिज्म से भी ऑर्गेनिज्म खाए पर वो चाहे नेचुरली सस्टेन कर सके, नेचुरली मेंटेन कर रिप्रोड्यूस कर सके, वी कॉल द बायोलॉजिकल resources. Like if the amount of like if number of cats would be for example, if the number of snake would be very high, then we need just like cat to kill these organisms to sustain these organisms. We can use biological method, biological resources. Biological method is very important because that would not give negative impact to the environment. Biological method तमाम सुठो तरीक़ो आहे. ॿियो आहे sustainable use of biological. Sustainable use of biological method it means that use the biological method that are in which they can be replaced or recycled and does not lead to a long-term decline of them. Biological method means we can use at a particular purpose, but we can again replace it, again reuse it, but it means that it does not just like decline in future. For example, if we have used water, just like if we have used water, the water become polluted. We can reuse it and to use an agriculture purpose definitely, and again reuse and to sustain. So this is the best example of biological resources. The next one, Earth's biological resources are vital to community, economics, and social development and conservation of biology. Reducing the amount of resources that are consumed. It helps to reduce the amount of resources. Recycling are the good example that could be are the good resources that can be recycled. Preservation ecosystem as using them in a responsible way. Biological systems that helps to sustain the environment become friendly to survive, especially the biological system use of resources. If we especially sustain the biological use of resources, then definitely the environment will become very friendly, and we especially there would be no threat from the environment. The next one, unsustainable use of biological resources. Unsustainable means something that gives negative impact to the environment, and their uses are very fast, especially, and that cannot be, we can say, replaced or recycled. That leads to decline in long term. Number of animals, plants species are threatened or endangered largely due to the over exploitation and loss of habitat. I have discussed earlier, especially in part 1, especially overgrazing. That is the very bad impact of our especially ecosystem, because in which especially grows, they may not grow fully, especially before their growth. So especially this grass, that grass has been eaten by the, especially we can say cattle. That would be negative impact the growth of these grass. So this is the best example of unsustainable use of biological resources. A number of animals, plants, species are threatened in the future, especially overexploitation. Overexploitation means these resources are to be used in unlimited conditions, and their special depletion will be very high. Continued loss of forest habitat with associated with the fauna and flora. Especially the loss, it will be loss of fauna and flora, means certain species of plant that will not survive in a particular habitat, they may die. We call unsustainable resources. Just like peacock, that is unsustainable. In future, peacock, they may become we can say that endangered, and definitely they may become extinct, and so it's time for us to sustain it. Rapid human population, fauna and flora will have serious implication for the nations or the natural resources agriculture. If the loss of fauna and flora, it will be negative impact for the environment and natural other resources and agriculture. Rapid human population growth is increasing on the, especially that is the very bad impact. Population growth, if you talk about increasing the poverty, has forced people to exploit biodiversity at unsustainable resources. It means that if the number of people would be very high and they especially exploit the resources, so it's a negative impact for biodiversity. Factors, what are the factors? Especially deforestation, we have already discussed, means loss of forest for we can say farming, agriculture purpose, or industry purpose, or housing purpose, we call the deforestation, so are caused by this factor. Overgrazing, we have already discussed overgrazing, the negative impact for the vegetation of the grass, or especially grass of the climate change, of the not climate but of the environment. Soil erosion, that is the negative impact. Slanting, water logging or poisoning, major threats to the remaining biodiversity of the country. Especially it's time for us to protect the biodiversity. The next one, define biodiversity in Pakistan. If we talk about Pakistan, is naturally blessed with Allah Almighty. If blessed with God Almighty, definitely we can say that God has blessed with natural resources in Pakistan. So it's Pakistan is blessed so with these natural resources. Pakistan is rich in biodiversity. If you talk about particularly in the arid and semi-arid regions, cover which 80% of land area. In Pakistan, 6,000 species of plants are present. Out of 7 species are endemic in Pakistan. It means that how many species? 6,000 species are present. Only 7 species, only 7% of these species have become endemic, means have become end. Mountain areas like Himalayas, Karakoram, Hindu Kush ranges are rich in fauna and flora. Definitely we need to protect the Himalayas and Karakoram, Hindu Kush vegetative area. Especially these vegetative areas are very important for protecting biodiversity. A number of plant and animal species, plant and animal species are threatened or endangered by largely to exploitation, loss of natural habitat, population, poverty. It means that we can just like we can just like cut, especially loss of habitat, poverty, so are the major loss of the habitat. So this is the negative impact our exploitation. Our exploitation जे करे छाती है तो habitat जो loss थी तो population वधे थी तने our exploitation उन जे resource छा deplete थी वञनि था ऐं जेके species आहिनि उहो छा loss थी वञे थो. The protected areas was established for in situ. Protected area वो चाहे ठाया हुआ इन situ biodiversity वो कयूं पाण जेका वो biodiversity आहे जिते चाहे पाण नेचुरली कंहिं स्पीशीज़ खे प्रोटेक्ट कयूं उनखे छा चवंदासीं इन situ biodiversity. for its conservation being framed by the have not been implemented पर यो चाहिए इंस्टीट्यूट इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं थियो इन जे करे कुछ स्पेशल लॉस जेके इम्प्लीमेंट न जे करे चाहिए इन स्पेशल क्या अञा बि ये थ्रेट जारी है द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ पाकिस्तान prepared the national conservation strategy in 1992 में गवर्नमेंट पाकिस्तान चाहे नेशनल कंजर्वेशन स्ट्रेटजी ठाहियो जंहिंजो मक़सदु इहो हो त मुंहिंजे स्पेशल कंजर्वेशन करें बायोडाइवर्सिटी खे पर कुछ लॉज इम्प्लीमेंट न थिया उन जी करे स्पेशली छा आहे असां मतिलबु उनखे उन जे करे अञा अॻिते प्रोटेक्ट नहीं थी विया आहिनि हाणे लास्ट आहे टॉपिक डिफाइन प्रोटेक्ट एरियाज़ पाकिस्तान जा कहिड़ा प्रोटेक्ट एरियाज़ उनमें बायोडाइवर्सिटी बारे में दिस इज द लास्ट टॉपिक clearly defined geographic space recognized dedicated and managed through legal or other effective means कुछ अड़ा स्पेशल एरियाज़ लीगली वे सां पाण खे प्रोटेक्ट करे सघूं था टू अचीव द लॉन्ग टर्म कंजर्वेशन ऑफ नेचर रिसोर्स विद कंजर्वेशन सर्विसेज एंड इकोसिस्टम सर्विस एंड कल्चरल वैल्यूज generally protected areas to be are understood to the in which human occupation or at least the exploration of resources is limited. It means that especially conservation resources are very important, but human just like human occupation in that areas, that is the threat. That is the that has limited the exploitation of our resources. So we can protect areas are essential for the biodiversity conservation. Protected areas are essential for biodiversity conservation, especially and often providing habitat and protected from hunting for threatened and endangered species. So माना यो पाण चई सघूं था बायोडाइवर्सिटी लाइ कंजर्वेशन लाइ स्पेशली जेके हैबिटाट में स्पेशल उनखे जे हंटिंग करण वग़ैरह त उन लाइ सख़्ती लाज़मी हुजणु घुरिजे In Pakistan protected areas are 4 types. पाकिस्तान कहिड़ा 4 जेके प्रोटेक्ट एरियाज़ आहिनि कहिड़ा आहिनि which are first of all national park in 29 national parks in Pakistan, wildlife sanctuary 99 wildlife sanctuary, game reserves 102 game reserves, especially number last community control areas 76 are community control areas are exist in Pakistan especially. So we discuss define national park wildlife sanctuary. What is national wildlife sanctuary? National park is a protected area set by the government of Pakistan for the protection and conservation of its outstanding sensory and wildlife. हिन जो मक़सदु इहो जेके स्पेशल उन एरिया जा उन पर्टिकुलर स्पेशल नेशनल जा जेके कंट्री जा जेके प्लांट हुआ या मिसाल एनिमल्स हुआ उनखे प्रोटेक्ट कर हिकिड़ी जॻह ते उनखे चवंदासीं नेशनल पार्क. Pakistan has 29 national park and some of these are under the conservation of scope of IUCN ऐं कुझु जेके छा आहे IUCN जे अंडर में आहिनि कहिड़ा आहिनि स्पेशली उहो स्पेशली पाण थर्ड पार्ट में डिस्कस कंदासीं. IUCN जो फुल फॉर्म छा आहे इंटरनेशनल यूनियन कंजर्वेशन एंड नेचर रिसोर्सिस त इन जे स्पेशल छा आहे इहो पाण IUCN जो फुल फॉर्म. A national park should be accessible to public for education research purpose. National park छा आहे रिसर्च एजुकेशन पर्पज़ लाइ accessible हूंदो आहे स्पेशली उन जो मेन मक़सदु हूंदो आहे. एग्जाम्पल हो गया सेंट्रल कराक्रम खीरथरस चित्राल ऐं अयूब नेशनल पार्क ही नेशनल पार्क एजुकेशन ऐं रिसर्च पर्पज़ लाइ रखियल आहे. वाइल्ड लाइफ सेंचुरी इज प्रोटेक्ट साइड वाइल्ड लाइफ सेंचुरी उहा आहे स्पेशल जेको चाहे प्रोटेक्ट कयूं उन ई पर्टिकुलर स्पेशल एरिया में उन जी स्पेशली जेके स्पीशी आहिनि उहो चाहे उहो ख़तमु थी वञनि थियूं उनखे चवंदासीं चवंदे वाइल्ड लाइफ सेंचुरी. Where ground is restricted, especially and it means that they cannot get basic their required needs. We can protect these wildlife sanctuaries by providing artificial mediums, by providing some additional support like water, nutrients to them. Are regulated beyond national parks and game reserves. Hunting is strictly prohibited in these areas. Wildlife sanctuary, definitely hunting is also prohibited. The main object of this sanctuary is to protect the fauna and flora. We can protect from fauna and flora from extinction. Extinction, it means that their species they may not exist. We can extinction. There are 99 wildlife sanctuaries in Pakistan. 66 are officially recognized by IUCN. IUCN, how many 66 are recognized by the IUCN? Bulistan, Cholistan, Nadra Desert, Nara Desert, and Habibin Dam Wildlife Sanctuary. These are the especially example of wildlife sanctuary. Wildlife sanctuary to be protected, set aside means we can protect hickories are especially only species का protect करें जेके उन्हें जो basic assess चाहे होते restrict हो जाए ऐं उनकी hunting वगैरह उन्हें particular में चाहे provide होती है use of botanical garden in biodiversity conservation. Botanical garden जो use चाहिए. Botanical garden is a garden which is dedicated to the collection and cultivation and display. उनमें क्या करना है? We can say first collection and cultivation. Cultivation and display. What is collection? Collection means we can collect the plant from different places, from different species we can say, and cultivate means to grow there, and to display means to show there, and of a wide range of plants labeled with their botanical names. If you visit in just like in a botanical garden, you will see their names are written in botanical names, especially with the labeled. You will see botanical garden is in a biodiversity falls into XC2 conservations. Botanical garden, it could be the example of the XC2 conservation. XC2 conservation means these plants they may not grow in their original habitat. So these plants that could be grow in artificial mediums that are by providing artificial mechanisms we call the XC2 conservations. Botanical gardens are institutions which maintain different varieties of ornamental cultivation and medicinal plants. So botanical gardens are very important, means that they help to just like maintain ornamental means some plants these are used as a decorative purpose at different historical places, buildings, houses, schools, colleges and offices. And medicinal, some of these plants are used as a medicinal purposes. So these are very important. Botanical gardens provide valuable information about taxonomy. Botanical garden, it provides information about taxonomy means to classify plants on their basis of certain characters. We can see the leaf anatomy, structural morphology. We can categorize on the basis of certain key characters. So taxonomy, horticulture, and biodiversity inventory. Botanical gardens conservation are conservation of rare species and genetic diversity. Botanical garden in which species we can keep, we can grow or cultivate rare species and genetic diversity. Rare species are those species they just like these species are endangered. We can say that. So we can say that these species are endangered. They may not survive in future. So we can protect these species. So we call the rare species. So this is all about biodiversity. I hope this lecture will be more helpful for you. So thank you so much for watching this lecture. We can say that we will meet you in the next lecture. So till bye bye.